so great to have you guys in here this morning. And if you guys have not met my friends here, I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. So maybe Em, what if you start? Just quickly introduce yourself. And yeah, most people that are listening probably know some about you.
Well, like you said, most folks call me Em. My name actually is Evelyn Lepard, and I am a long-time Mr. person. I have been in the community for 30 years now. So wherever we connected, we started to move forward.
And then, about John.
My name is John Loggins, preferred pronouns he and his, and I also blessed to be a part of this community. I lived in the Vista for about 15 years. Prior to that, Mira Mesa, so I'm a long-time San Diegan, an Air Force brat. My father was a police officer there, and I think I would describe myself as concerned about the community and trying to figure out how to do have this conversation.
Well, so just to frame the conversation, right? For us as a church community, this really shouldn't be confusing. We are starting at the very beginning, and like we have talked about this, we talk about often about the law of first mentions, and the idea is that when something is mentioned, the way it is mentioned at the beginning, it is when the story ends. So at the beginning in the scriptures it says that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It talks about all of that stuff. But when it comes to creating human beings, the scripture says that God created them, male and female, he created them, and he created them in the image of God. This is the idea called Imago Dei. So it's not as though we are having to pull stuff out to bring them in here so we can have a conversation. It's that we're trying to say, look, something is lost here. And when we are excavating it, we have to excavate it for everything that it is. So I'll start there. And as I'm talking to you guys, I want to talk first about, well, I'm just going to take a look at the t-shirts and I'll go from there. So word association. Word association. Justice.
Right and wrong. Fairness, equality.
Okay.
How many words do I have to?
A word or a phrase. A word or a phrase. So you done it. Okay. So let me ask that the second time. It's intentional. I've done it that way anyway. Justice.
Equity.
Equity. Justice.
Responsibility.
Responsibility. All right. Woo! Black Lives Matter.
Truth,
Truth.
understanding,
Mm.
shouldn't be hard to understand or accept.
Black Lives Matter.
My father matters, my brother matters, I matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Now,
No. All right. And it is now that we begin the conversation. So, how do you guys say, and again, I am coming from the frame of reference that says all people are created by God, the Imago Dei, the image of God. That's where, as a pastor, that's where I'm standing. And as we're having this conversation, let's talk about racial justice in America. How do you guys look at race and power? And how do you experience race and power? And if you can be a little bit louder, I don't know if can they hear us? It sounds great?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yes.
I'll pass for a second.
All right.
Think about that.
well, I think about race and power in the United States specifically in terms of how the United States sees itself. We were having a conversation earlier about how Americans and people can get on board with a variety of other different causes fairly quickly, whether it be environmental justice, food justice, not always the fastest, but I think the issue around race is kind of how America sees itself. Like I think the notion that you just shared about all people being created equal and coming from that religious context, I think it's also built into the ideal of what America is, and for Americans to think that we have a systemic racism, and they have to start to think about like this system that we're in is essentially flawed, as opposed to being able to say like, okay, well, we've been over polluting, we had some bad practices before. I think or even with homelessness, people can write that off as people being lazy or there being some mental health issue. They don't have to question the system that they live in. They can just diagnose this thing as one thing, and then to look at a systemic racism, you have to actually diagnose the larger thing, and that makes you have some dissonance around how you believe, how you feel, how you're taking up your life, and people don't like to do that. I think and I feel like people don't want to do that work, and therefore it's easier just to say there's a few bad cops versus saying this is a system, power dynamic that exists, that is saying that all people aren't created equal, that is saying that I've had certain privileges and blessings in my life that other people aren't having, and I think reconciling those two things is the part where we get stuck. It's easier for us not to have that, or easier for some people not to have that conversation versus how I'm experiencing. Like it's imperative that we have the conversation, because I'm tired of seeing people that look like me die on TV. I'm tired of feeling the microaggressions and the day-to-day prejudices and biases that I have to experience in my life. So when people always point the fingers like, oh, you're always playing the race card, black people are always naming race, I was like, well, we name it because we live it. We don't have the privilege or the opportunity not to see it. Like, they're saying like, it's something we're putting out there, but it's all we see, and for us not to name it would be for us to deny a big part of who we are in our life experience.
So you can actually do both. I think you bring up microaggressions, right? So that you can also touch on that if you want to, or you can go to the original question, which is race and power and how you experience it.
Well, I was listening to John. You said something about power and naming it, but when I think of, if you're talking word association, the word power is an action word. Power means I have the power to do something, I have the power to change something. If I'm going to name it, then what am I going to do about it? And power, as it's represented in America, means usually somebody has power over someone or something, takes that power and uses it for good and uplifts. Or if you're not uplifting and uplifting those around you with your power, then those around you feel powerless. And I think that's the dynamic we have in America right now, is folks have to chant Black Lives Matter in such a way that we're not wanting to feel powerless anymore. That we matter, and that we don't want to take your power, but if you recognize that you are, that you hold the power, then how are we going to take that dynamic and make it just and equitable, so that in the situation that I needed, I'm thinking of unfortunately, as I picture George Floyd powerless, he was under arrest. Yet he was powerless to even do anything in his own defense. He was powerless, and now he's gone. There was no conversation about it. The power dynamic was so evident that that's why everybody's upset, because everybody in America continues to see that power dynamic, the power that was over him and his powerlessness. And everybody else powerless to do anything about it.
Essentially you're saying what we were seeing there in those images are both a reality but also metaphorical of how we live our lives.
Yeah, people, because it was filmed and people were all around the people filming it felt powerless to stop it. The most power I can have is to videotape it with my phone. No black person was empowered enough to step in and help this man. That's how powerless. This person is dying. If we were seeing a person dying on the street and we didn't help them, isn't there like a Good Samaritan law against that? And yet, with all the power and strength, I couldn't do CPR. I couldn't help this man. All I could do was watch him die. That's a power dynamic.
So there's a power dynamic there that has been named. There is microaggressions that have been named, and then there's equity that has already been named. That's a lot of big concepts. So maybe let's just kind of we don't have to have like dictionary definitions of these things, but how do you guys define some of those things, just for our audience here?
Just in kind of terminology, like microaggressions would be, the day-to-day thing that people of color, black people, I'll speak for myself, experience, like, let me touch your hair, or where are you from? Because,
people try to do that with me often.
like
my beard, which is weird.
Like being multiracial and people being curious, and I understand being curious, but I also, when people say where are you from, I hear it as you're not majority culture, you're not like me, you're something else, you're different. It's putting you apart, and and again, depending on what the people's intentions are, it really kind of puts you in a different place. And after, like, if you hear it so many times a day, like repetitively throughout the day, it starts to kind of make you feel like you don't belong. And I feel like that's a piece of it. Just thinking on the scale of it, I think it all builds up. That's one of the things that I think is so nuanced about this conversation. Is like, you can break off into microaggressions, and then there you have like the major aggressions. But the other piece of the power dynamic that I would define as well is like, I think a lot of the conversation right now is being focused on the force that the police are using and exerting that power over folks. But I think, any American kid is, even the ones that are, anti-systemic racists will look back and watch these old movies about racist times and think about how awful it used to be and like how much better we are now. But I would say like some of those same dynamics are still there. It's not just about the police brutalizing people, it's the police not doing anything at all. They have the power to not arrest people. They have, a lot of conversation about Trump, doing his first rally in Tulsa on Juneteenth. The June 19th coming up, and thinking about what that massacre represents in black culture, hundreds of people died, and to this day, almost 100 years later, no one has ever been, arrested or prosecuted for anything that happened that day. And if police aren't going to stand up for the rights of anybody, or stand up for the rights of black folks, to me, that's also a very strong indictment of the system. It's horrible that you're out there shooting us, but it's also horrible that you're letting people shooting us. And Ahmaud Arbery, if there's no video, that just goes away. I also think if there's no video of George Floyd, that goes away as well. So I feel like, or if even somebody had intervened and George Floyd didn't die, you would have had, if it was a citizen, you would have had 2 black people in jail, and a cop with maybe another warning against him. The fact that it was caught on tape and then he passed is what's galvanizing folks. But I think the system around it that let that circumstance happen, and just to actually think about the outcome, if he would have survived, it would have just been a perpetuation of the system. It also helps me stay invigorated and pushing forward and making sure that this gets heard now instead of later, because I can't imagine how many other folks are in that same predicament.
So before you pick that up, and before you whether you want to go back to defining equity, I think at some point that we have to do that. But along the way, I just want you guys to know, and I'm sure there's like church folk that are tuning into this, and there are some people that are just friends of friends that are tuning into this. Number one, okay, we don't have this conversation every day. I promise you, as difficult as this conversation is to receive, it is difficult to talk about it. It is difficult, it's exhausting to talk about it. So right now, I just want you to use your power, and I want you to share this as it's being talked about. That's the power you actually have. All you gotta do is hit share. So I think that's the first responsibility I'm giving to you. Like, let's not just be consumers and consume this. Like, use your own words and your own language to like share this moment. So just go ahead and do that, number one. Second, so far, what stood out to you? So far in this moment, would you just write in the comments what stood out to you? And then as we do, we got that Imago Dei piece. So that's like solved. All men and women are created in the image of God, and we can nuance that and nuance that and nuance that is deeper than you think. But when we fast forward to the story that we've been preaching about in the book of Acts, you see this happen again, where God's saying, look, I already said these things. In those days I'll pour out my spirit on all people. You young men who dream dreams, and you'll be thinking, young men, okay, great, like we know that, and like you have your young woman just walking into the kitchen as usual, until then the scripture says, no, your young women. And it says your maid servants, and it's like everybody. And I'll pour out my spirit on all of them and they'll prophesy. Peter shares this story. But when you fast forward the same story in the book of Acts, later on, you see Peter struggling with this so much that the apostle Paul, St. Paul, has to confront him publicly about his racism. And not only does this happen between Peter and Paul, the Lord himself in a vision, in a way, had to confront the apostle Peter. This Peter who is like who is viewed as the rock of the church, right? The first pope of the church has to be confronted about these things. And so if you are struggling, welcome to the party. This is not new. The struggle has always been there. The struggle has always been there in the church. And like I was telling a few pastors this, I think it's like this past week or the week before that, I said I'm really concerned about people out there, but I'm more worried about you. You are the ones I fear the most. Because someone with a bad theology is more deadly, and has been historically, than a person who's just on the street who's saying, all lives matter in the church. So we have to, what do you call it? I think it's like, it's gardening language. You are gardening. We have to, something in the bud, nip it.
Nip it in the bud.
Yeah, that's gardening language. Yeah, just don't to me right now. But let's nip that in the bud. And I think the bud is a church right now. Let's nip it in the bud. So, anyways, equity. Can you define that for us and then maybe tell us what you're thinking right now?
I think it goes back to what you said. We have to acknowledge that all men and women were created equal. We start off, being born as human beings. There's just human being, one race. It's the human race. We're all humans. And how the dynamic continues at such a rapid pace for inequity, that's man-made also. And that speaks to that power dynamic. That speaks to what you were saying, John. Yes, I recognize that I have, that I've been blessed in my life for, I have been afforded certain niceties and privileges. But the inequity part becomes when I don't recognize that how do I use my blessings and my good fortune, or what I worked really hard for, so that I'm not one who is the oppressor of those less fortunate. Because once I take what was once a gift and a blessing, and then I become an oppressor, and my reason for living is to be better than others. Things become more and more inequitable. The oppressed, and in this case, we're talking people of color.
In particular, black people.
In the system, the inequity grows farther. The power dynamic, like I say, becomes farther, and those at the bottom, what was once equal becomes farther and farther and farther unequal, I guess. To where, unless it's recognized and called out and named and purposefully addressed, it doesn't get fixed. It just goes on generation after generation after generation, and those that are blessed are more blessed and pass their blessings on to their own, not shared equally. There's no equity.
You know, there's an interesting thing, and I'll pass this on to you too. There's an interesting thing in the book of Leviticus, in Leviticus chapter 25, where God actually, sets up this nation, and then he says, and then he puts, like a contingency ahead of time, because he recognizes that as we go, there's going to be these discrepancies. And he institutes like this idea, the idea of, you've probably heard of Jubilee, right? The idea of Jubilee, according to Leviticus chapter 25, is that US, is 22 or 25, someone can verify and write it below. But the idea was that, after 50 years, essentially, if you have slaves, and back then people used to have slaves, right? You own slaves, and what you have to do is you have to let them go. You have to free everybody. Essentially, the idea was that the economy of Israel had to start over again.
Restart.
Yeah.
Restart. Hit a restart. It's the year of Jubilee. So everyone is left off, like, let's start this over again because something here is not right.
Right.
So these things we preach about them. In fact, Jesus himself in Luke chapter 4, when he starts his ministry, he actually starts there. He says, the Spirit of the living God is upon me, for he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. And it goes on and says to set the captives free. What do you think he's talking about? How would we preach that and still, in this day and age, own slaves? And I would argue that we do. I would argue that we do. How would we do that and still own slaves, right? So anyway, again, wide open.
Yeah, no, I feel like I want to build on both those
Yes.
things, just with the Jubilee thing too. Like, I feel like there is, with any kind of economic turmoil that we face, like particularly right now with COVID-19, and it provides itself, yes, it is a tragic and a horrible virus that's kind of plaguing us at the moment, but it's also doing something with our economy, and what we're choosing to do is in response is to kind of fortify and bolster the system that we have instead of Jubilee. Like, all the tax credits and all the credits we're giving to big banks and businesses, that could be easily in loan forgiveness to college students. It could be even mortgage forgiveness for folks. Who are you trying to prop up? Like, if you want to change the world and support middle class families, this is how you would do it. But instead, we choose to double down and reinvest on the systems that are broken instead of thinking about it with the Jubilee mind frame of saying this is an opportunity for us to kind of reset and reconceptualize, because I think, like with everything, if your economy gets too one-sided, and I think this is why Jubilee was established, because it helped, it stopped mobility from happening, it stopped people from accumulating wealth to the degree that we have right now, and we just disregard this whole principle because people want to maintain their power structure. And then to build off some of the things that Em was saying, like, one of the arguments that I hear often, by lots of people, is that, I'm colorblind. I don't see race, and which is, I think, an ultimate goal that everybody has one day, that we won't see race. But I don't think you get there without doing the work first. You can't just, I'm colorblind and I'm going to treat everybody equally. Treating someone equally and then thinking about it in terms of equity, like you can't, like the analogy that's coming to my mind is a poker analogy.
Hit us up. We're in church.
Yeah.
So you're good. It's,
My part,
yeah.
I don't even really play
Poker,
poker.
hey, bring the offering bucket. We're about to play poker.
Perfect.
This was just how it was shared with me, is that, like, you know, if you are playing a game of poker and you've been cheating for a long time and you have all the wealth built up on your side, and then you're playing with somebody with very few chips, there's really no way that person with little chips is going to win, because you can bully the pot. You can use all the money and the resources you have to make sure that person doesn't win. It's not about you cheating anymore. You can say, I stopped cheating all of a sudden. Like, oh, all of a sudden I'm going to be equal. I'm going to treat everybody the same. But if you have all this stuff behind you, that's not equity. That means you have, so when you're thinking about, like, how do we get past our current situation and how do we address, you know, racism and oppression in our society, I think you have to look at it through the lens of equity and say, like, well, how do we make up for lost accumulated family wealth because, you know, black families weren't allowed to own property, or black folks didn't get the GI Bill, black folks didn't get college tuition from military, the loan interest rates were higher, like all the things that prevented black folks from creating ancestral wealth still exist. But they not even didn't exist in the past, they still exist. There's still redlining laws from the coast. There's still covenant communities in from Maryland to Arizona, to where, you know, certain families can't exist. So to say, like, okay, I'm just going to be colorblind and that's going to be enough, because as long as I treat people equal, and if everybody was just like me, then the world would be fine, isn't really the case. I think that the task to take those blessings that you have, like, not to say that you're a bad person for inheriting and having ancestral wealth. Your parents worked just as hard as anybody, I'm sure, for that. But, like, if you're not taking that blessing and you're not actually thinking about how you can use it to impact and help the people that didn't have those same blessings, that, or actually not even didn't have them or denied them because of some structural things, then I think you can do more. Yes, stay committed to being colorblind in the future, but realizing what that means is you have to do work around it.
So you addressed, I don't know if you guys picked this up, he just addressed the idea, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, right? I pulled myself up by the bootstraps. And Dr. King used to say about that you know, the same nation that is refusing, from an equity standpoint, the same nation that is refusing to help black folks now, helped Midwestern farmers, or the white people, immigrants, when they came here, for them to be able to farm, help them, help fund their work.
And continue to.
And continue to. So you can't say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, Dr. King says, to a man without boots. That's really mean. You know, so.
Or to judge them by the boots that they wear, because I feel like there's so many, you know, particularly, you know, I'll own that I'm politically progressive. Like, there's a lot of political conservatives out there that will be anti-union, will be anti-organizing, and I think, you know, for a party that says people should pull themselves up by the bootstraps, you know, this is a free country. If you work hard, you're going to succeed. And then judge communities who decide that how they want to succeed is through community. They want to build up their community infrastructure. They want a union. They want to organize together. Those are all ways that we're choosing to do it, but because our ways of doing things aren't valued, they're going to say, like, no, that you can't do it this way. I want you to pull yourself up by the bootstraps that I give you, but not the way you want to do it on your own. And again, I think that's another way that, you know, injustice kind of shows itself, and just in the way people know and experience life. You know, how black people see community and working together and pulling each other up. Like, you know, my bootstraps are connected to my neighbor's bootstraps, which is connected to my brother's bootstraps, and I'm pulling us all up together. And to me, that's a more stable, strong way to do it. But that's not, you know, American individualism. That's not how conservative, you know, that's how policies aren't set that way. They're set so you can pull yourself up, and then if you get to a certain level, you can join us, as opposed to saying, like, pull yourself up and we can change and grow as a society.
Ooh, I can feel like we almost kind of like had to breathe in that moment, and yet we're saying we can't breathe, right? So, yeah, just what do you think so far? Again, what stands out to you so far? And yeah, we want you guys to do this along the way. Like we've said, it matters what's happening here, but it is very much connected to what's happening there with you. You know, like from at least the preaching standpoint, I always say, like, my anointing flows as your anointing flows. And so would you just, just help us, talk to us, how you're feeling, how are things going? And if you are there and you are among the leadership community at Ebenezer and people are sharing things, would you please be praying for them along the way? We need that. Like, would you just write out your prayer there as people are sharing? I know we are online, but let's not get kind of like weird where people are sharing stuff that's like dear to them and it's like we are quiet. Say something. Like, be praying for them, say something. And if you haven't shared this yet, you are so far consuming us. And I want you to move from a place of a consumer to be in a place of a co-creator, which is actually part of the heart of how we put this together. We are not just random people. We are friends. We are actually co-creators in the community. And so one of my friends, Mike Strong, who you know, asked these questions. What are the murmurings in your community? What are the murmurings in your community? And what are some of the things that are beginning to maybe pop up now that are becoming subjects of conversation, you think?
I think people are looking for leadership. I think people are looking for leadership. People are looking for everybody wants to be heard. But I think those who feel less powerful are looking for a platform to share, and I think there's a need to have it facilitated, kind of like this conversation. And I think about right now in the COVID situation, because I've been staying home. When I walked out the door, Mike said, "Oh, you're going somewhere?" Because I have not been going places. That's for my own personal, my age, my health reasons. I've been laying low, but I've been paying attention, and I've been paying attention nationally. But I also have this bird's eye view because I live closer up to Mesa College, and I look at the next door neighbor, that web page. I'm part of East Claremont and South Claremont and Bayho and Bay Park and the Linda Vista and North area, rather than what's happening like in the heart of Linda Vista. Just because of my zip code, and when I signed up, that's where I am, and I see such anger and diversity, and no way for someone to facilitate these conversations so that they can get past the anger, and they become conversations, because they're not conversations now. They're ping pong matches with who's going to hit the ball the hardest and see where it lands and who's going to respond. And I see that with most of social media, really. You follow who you choose to follow. You respond to those you want to respond to, or the other thing of, I'm just going to lay this out there and see where it lands, kind of thing. They're the folks that do that a lot. But I think now is the most amazing, opportune time to have these conversations. But who's going to facilitate them to where there's an outcome? And so people know when you say next steps, oh yeah, well, let's agree on some next steps. What can I do? Because if they're not facilitated, then, like you said, it'll just go away.
It's interesting, almost like getting a vision of, as we're sitting here, there's another mic behind you and behind you and behind me, and there's like somebody else there, somebody else there, and it just kind of keeps going. that way. And it's like, okay, like let's
Bring it
talk.
in, yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting. It's like we are
We're
a
consumers, like you
nation
said.
devoid of leadership.
Yes.
Yeah, particularly right now. I've been just thinking about that. Happy Barack Obama Day, everyone. But I think that point resonates with me too, like the notion of lack of leadership. And you know, one I want to name too, like I feel like I consume news a lot, like from Nextdoor app to Fox News, and then one of the big criticisms about the movement is like there's no leadership, like it's just a bunch of chaotic stuff, and to which I would say like that's not accidental. Thinking about Black leadership in our community and what whether that be literal or figurative assassinating of characters, assassination of lives. That voice has been snuffed out. I know I long for it, but I'm also the murmuring that I'm hearing is less murmuring, and I feel like more shouting from young people. Like the things that are coming out of young folks. Like I think I have lots of good thoughts. I'm happy to be able to share them here, and I hope you listen. But I also hope you listen to the young people out there, because they're the ones that are out there naming the stuff that I wouldn't name. Like I consider myself a king, not in the royal sense, but in a follower and a believer in the words of Dr. King. I truly had always aspired. I liked his civil rights movement, and what he had done for a long time was and is very powerful. But at the same time, he was very cognizant of presenting things that were digestible to white folks.
Yes.
This is how you should look. This is how you should behave. There should be, he understood what riots were, but he didn't condone them. I don't think anybody really wants to condone them. But at the same time, you have young people putting words like white supremacy, defund the police, abolish prison systems, things that politicians are too scared to name, too scared to say, but make really good sense, and are things that I know I've felt myself, but would never have said, because that's not something that was digestible. Young people are saying it, they're rallying around it, and they're pushing that forward. And you may not agree with it, but take time to listen to what they're saying, because the content of what they're saying is not framed in really clean political sound bites that are digestible. What they're saying are about transformational systems changes that I think are important. And as much as many times as I've gone through this, I have Dr. King and Brother Malcolm tattooed on my arm, and have been part of protests, and over again, it just gets frustrating. And there's a time when you start to think that, well, maybe there's a new way forward, and I think there's some new voices coming out right now, and they're murmuring, they're stirring, and I want to offer them a lot of love and support, and saying like, I can follow your lead. I don't need to be in front of this. Because I've been trying to do it and I haven't had the success that I want. I'll wholeheartedly own that, but I think it's important that we do hear those voices.
Well, so let me go back to Acts chapter 1, as she's putting her own Bible up. No, it's just a book.
This is just a book. This is and I bring it out. I want to share this. I just got this book yesterday, so I haven't I haven't digested it by any means, but. Patrisse Khan-Cullors is one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a compilation of how these women came together and were able to start their movements in a very organized way in LA and in DC and I believe Chicago. In ways that make sense, and like I said, if we were having this conversation next week, I would have had it all figured out.
Like I say, this is just part one.
But
this is just part one.
These are women. These are leaders. There are our future leaders, and I think part of what they're doing is born out of the frustration and the need to act now. Because the time is now and the time is right. And John, you said something interesting about, young people, young people don't have the filter that we have. or the wisdom of age, having lived through, so much. And that being said.
Those kids like Jermaine, who's somewhere on the
Yeah,
internet over
yeah.
there, just screaming stuff.
Yeah, Jermaine will just say, I'm like, man, did he just say that? It made sense, but man, did he just say that out loud? Was I just hearing what he was thinking kind of thing? Yeah, because we need that. Don't get me wrong, we need that.
Oh, absolutely.
The one thing that Dr. King did was they met at night and they studied and they strategized and they planned and they responded to the, it was, you know, it's like this war out there. And it was also planning for the fact that we're going to be in this for the long haul. You know, people don't realize, you know, Rosa Parks sat down and we had a bus boycott. That lasted for years, people. You know, boycotts don't just, we walk in and now we're going to get served because, you know, we had a scuffle. No, these things lasted for years. And history, everyone needs to know the history of this country. And what the young people are so frustrated about now is we spent years in the 60s and in the 70s and the 80s and in the 90s. Let's go to, you know, we're going to go to, you know, continuing riots. They're frustrated because people forgot that history. What, you know, was the revolution televised? What, you know, were the cell phones out? And because they weren't, we forgot.
Man, I'm just going to go back here again in like Acts chapter 2. Now they were dwelling in Jerusalem, Jews and devout men from every nation under the heaven, under this sound. So it's like you have all this, this thing is so strategic, like you couldn't write it yourself, right? All these people together. And we also preached a weird sermon on like the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1, where people don't preach there. We start the story in Matthew chapter 2. But when you look at the genealogy, it's full of hints of all people. You have like Rahab, and you have all this, you have the Ruths in the like interweaved in the story. The story was like so full. I might understand anybody else struggling with this thing anywhere else, but for like a church person to struggle with this, like, and yes, I understand resonance, dissonance along the way, right? But it's like it's right in there in the blueprint. In many ways, the confrontation against power is right in there in the blueprint. And when it comes, we don't always recognize it as that thing. You know, like Moses didn't want to go and do it. He didn't, like Moses was practically related to Pharaoh. They were practically brothers. But let me tell you something about people that are called. Here's the thing about people that are called. God calls people that are in many ways, this represents the way our lives kind of play out. We touch the problem and we touch power. In the moment you touch the problem and you touch power, you're recruited. And when I say problem, I'm not saying like our lives are problem, but I'm just saying you understand this dynamic and you understand, you know, power dynamics and how they work, right? All of us, in many ways, are very privy to like white culture in a way. We've been given the privilege of whether we are sitting in that room. I don't really believe that we are sitting on an adult's table. I think we're still sitting on the kids' table, but we're in the room. And as long as you have the ability to enter Pharaoh's courts, you touch power, and you understand what is going on here. You can't not speak. You can't not speak. When you touch the problem and you touch power, you've already been recruited. And so I want to encourage towards that. Let's speak a little bit to our friends that may be stuck in a force neutral.
I feel like that's, you know, tricky because I can't speak for those folks, but one of the things that, you know, the conversation for a long time, and we started talking about this earlier, even in this conversation, you know, I think just to move people to the conversation, we've talked about, you know, having people examine their privilege or the blessings that they have. But the piece that I you know, want to explore more and want to work with folks is I think that, you know, racism is bad for everyone. systemic racism is bad for everybody. So being in touch with the problem doesn't mean just being in touch with the problem for black folks. It means being in touch with the problem as it exists for you. Like, you know, if you're a white person that will just say, oh, I'm just white, or, you know, like, and not understand your culture, not understand the background that comes with you. There's a lot of life and a lot of generative energy from knowing your own history, and being able to bring your full self to the space. But I think a lot of that has been, you know, denied to a lot of folks. And then this is kind of a good, because it's not my work to do, but the fact that, you know, I could wear, or you can see Tommy Smith and John Carlos at the Olympics holding that black fist up and talking about black power, and people saying those things. Like, you know, understanding that there is a reason why we can say that and you can't say white power, because there's a power dynamic that's systemic. Like, you know, there's a reason for that. And your inability to claim your power and not be rooted in some kind of racist thing, because that's the way our system is set up, is hurtful for them as well. And you know, and I think having them examine
it diminishes you.
Yeah.
It diminishes you.
Yeah.
It does diminish you. That's where part of our frustration comes, right? Is that, don't you see that is beneath you?
Yeah. Your light can't shine within the system either. And to do your work around that, like, you know, I want, you know, it's great that you're allies and you're supporting us, but I think there's some personal work that can be done as well. And that's, you know, however you want to take that up, but like, how do you let yourself shine and realize that you're doing it in a system that is, you know, set up as a racist system?
I think as I hear what you're saying, and I'm thinking of the other statement about the color blindness, you know, which is absolutely ridiculous. We're not colorblind.
The poem is not as beautiful when we are colorblind. Guys, like, come on, let's just kind of let that down. Like, we are God's workmanship created in the, like, we shouldn't be colorblind, actually.
I mean, that's just as disrespectful as anything else. I mean, but, you know, I remember there was a lesson back during Black History Month a couple of years ago that a teacher was attempting to do in a classroom where I think it was along those lines of, you know, the white kids being able to say, well, I don't have any culture, you know, well, and so then it became more of, well, what do you celebrate? You know, what kind of holidays? Is your family speak another language? What country did you come from? All that kind of thing. And was in this, because of this community, you know, the white kids really are the minority, and it's very obviously so, you know, especially in Montgomery. And so the idea that you can't celebrate your differences if you can't identify them. You know, you can't identify them, you can't name them. There was that opportunity for Black and brown children to start to articulate what it is about them that does empower them, and you know, and they started talking about their culture, and this is what we celebrate. But it was just, you know, I don't know where I'm going with this, but just with the recognizing of, if we have a society that still is trying to figure out, are we working towards colorblind? Are we celebrating diversity? Are we, you know, what are we calling it? What is the end goal? Is the end goal that, you know, like you said, if all people are created, is the end goal that everybody has a big house and a car and a dog and a fence around it, and the ability to, you know, go on holiday and travel to Europe and Africa and experience the world equally, because we all have the means and you know, are blessed to do so? Or is the end goal for each individual to really be able to celebrate who they are as a human being, and then live their life with, you know, a just and and verdant life with all that America has to offer.
Mhm.
You know, this is a country where, you know, land of the free, home of the brave. It's almost like, what is the ask that will lead us to the end goal? What is the end goal?
I think that's good, and I know that that the question is you're setting that up there. It's not even it's rhetorical for now,
Yes.
and we will let it be rhetorical for now. But we have about like 10 minutes or so, and let's just kind of set up what part 2 of this conversation might be. Maybe with like shorter sound bites connected to education and how we educate. Right? So. Yes, just go. I had a thought in mind, but go.
No.
You go.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think it's important to try to bring as many people along with us as well, but I also think that it's important for it not to let it paralyze us, like to overly focus on bringing, you know, folks that just don't get it there. Like, you know, it's important to do, and, you know, connecting it to the education piece. Like, you know, I have the great privilege to work with some wonderful, I think the best and the brightest students over at USD. And, you know, this last couple months I've been following their Facebooks and their Instagrams and looking at what they're posting and seeing the feedback they're getting from family and friends. And, you know, USD is a predominantly white institution, and a lot of our student leaders, you know, are out there putting out, you know, wonderful things. And I know, you know, social media activism isn't, you know, the only way to do it, but like for them to be out there putting those things out and then taking heat from folks, you know, I've been trying to show them a lot of love, but looking at how much investment they're putting into trying to convince somebody that they're never going to convince, versus going out there and either doing your own work, trying to figure out your own identity, being authentic, or going out there and stepping up with a different cause. You know, I think would be helpful.
We need to create models, right? Models. We need to create prototypes. We need to. What is our hypothesis? What are we trying out? And I'm just going to mention this real quick. If you are here, you are at like Ebenezer. You know what that is? If you dig into Ebenezer in the scriptures, you will find that the idea of it was essentially, this is a place where God helped us. We didn't pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. That's the concept biblically. But like Ebenezer in American history would be the church that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his father co-pastored. And the idea was that this is a place where people went to get their marching orders on what the fight on the streets was about. This is where people got trained. This is where people found community. This is where people got strengthened for the battle ahead. You know, I would even imagine this as people are being like water hosed on the streets. This is where they're being trained for what it looks like to be water hosed and not react. Like, this is that.
Yes.
And if you feel like we have gone like radical by having this conversation, I promise you, we haven't done nothing yet. We have not done anything. You know, we haven't even gotten people in here to really talk about these things, and we haven't really even taken water to the people that are protesting. I mean, we haven't done anything. We just got here. And if you're getting tired now, like, I'll be worried. You just got here. We just got here. Yeah. So let's behave as though we just got here. But anyways, let's bend this towards, let's bend this towards education, and just kind of get ready for what the next time, next time we talk, what this might look like. A little bit more. Kids, do we press kids to act like the dominant culture? The answer is no. Why?
That's because they can. You know, education's at a turning point. Those that are in power, and I think of, when you say kids, I think of school systems. School systems that were designed to be systems of compliance, that are, you know, the factory model, bells ring and you do this and then you stop, and then, you know, the dissemination of here's the knowledge that you need to have for today. One person's perspective, the white ethnocentric piece of history is this is what we're studying. This is how economics work for those who already have, the leg up to even be part of that game. Doesn't recognize those who are coming in without those blessings. Education doesn't recognize that. Or what does it mean to be educated? What should we be learning? So, education is a curriculum discussion. What should we be learning? If kids are going to take and learn from what Dr. King learned, and how he took what he learned from Gandhi and took it to the next level, and the training, like you said, when we're out here for the long haul, and this is what's going to happen, and this is how we act, and then we'll regroup and we'll love each other and we'll carry on. The young folks need to be educated about that. The lack of diversity, Black folks get a month. We have Hispanic Heritage Month. We have Asian American Month, and then back to the norm, which is, I guess the rest are white months. I'd hate to say that it's that simple, but it kind of is. And who determines the powers that be, the ones that are making decisions for what kids learn, how they learn it, and how they are excluded, and if they're not in compliance, how they're all but executed.
Hold right there, and then I want you to have the concluding thought. I think that's talking about equity, talking about responsibility, talking about respect. One of the things I wanted to do for my friends here, we didn't talk about this. We didn't talk about it, and I'm making you receive this. We're gonna actually collect one of them old-fashioned love offerings, and the reason we're gonna do it is because I want us to honor them, and I want us to honor their time, which is a thing we should be doing in culture anyway. So I think it's either Jerry or Ruby, if they're out there, they're going to put up Venmo and give to that Venmo for us to pay for this time. You've paid for more boring things in your life. So let's do that love offering, and everything that is collected is going to be given to you guys for your time. We so respect the fact that you have respected us today to be with us. And we are so honored by your presence. We're so honored by your presence and your thought process. And I hope this is the beginning of at least a few of the conversations that we need to have together. And so, any concluding thoughts?
I would just say yes to everything Em just said about education, and to add the piece that you were saying, how do we learn to respond and not react? Because I think sometimes, I'll speak for myself, there's lots of work that we can do with kids, young adults, around developing compassion and empathy, and being as deliberate about that as we are some other things. And to recognize, being authentic requires you to do that work. I could be somebody who wants to dismantle systems, but that's also me being in the grip of a racist system, because I'm not normally an angry dismantler. I like to build things. I like to create things, and what the system's pulling me to do, and being cognizant of no, that's not what I need to be doing. This is making me angry. This is making me want to tear things down. But I'm not that normally. Authentically, I like to build things. How do I stay true to that and not react to the situation? It's something that's really hard to do because I have those feelings, but this is a long game with I don't like to think of things as battles always, but there's multiple fronts that we need to be on. We need people dismantling, we need people creating, we need people thinking differently. And one of my minister friends always says vocation is where your great talent meets the world's great need. What is it that you authentically have to offer the world, and how do you offer it to respond to what the world needs right now is what I think is what we're called to do, and that means responding and not reacting.
And helping kids to be able to do that. If you could say that to children when they were coming into school, that we know you have talents and we know that you have strengths, and how can we nurture those talents and those strengths and help you to be part of the solution moving forward instead of the opposite. I'll leave it at that.
Revelation chapter 7, 9. After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. And then it goes on and on and on. Like, togetherness won't stop. So it won't. This is like the vision of the future. You might as well learn it now. You might as well learn it now. So thank you guys so much for being with us today, and God bless you guys, and thank you guys for being with us, and God bless you guys. Let me just go ahead and pray, and then I'll close our time. Father, thank you so much for just the opportunity to be here, to be brothers and sisters, and to learn together things that maybe we didn't learn in Sunday school. Thank you for giving us the courage to be able to enter in difficult conversations. Now I pray that if there are things that we have said that agitate, because your spirit is causing people to be agitated, that those would stick. And if there are things that we have said that agitate because they're coming from the passion of our own spirit, I pray that you will repel people immediately. Thank you for the blessing of time. Thank you for the blessing of effort. Thank you for the blessing of knowledge. And thank you for your ever-present grace. Thank you, Lord, that you're the God who is always calling us towards the ideal. That you're the God who gives grace to those that can't yet meet the ideal. We're grateful. In Jesus' name. Amen, amen, and amen. All right, bro. Thank you.